G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 4 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers. Welcome, loyal listeners of True Blue Conversations. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Australian Warfighter Coffee. Veteran owned and run, driven by a simple yet powerful motto: people over profit. Every dollar goes towards supporting veterans and first responder charity groups. Head on over to AustralianWarfighters.com and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Because let's face it, any other coffee is just brown sadness water. Now, let's get on with the show. Raise your glasses, podcasters. This episode of True Blue Conversations is brought to you by Wet Canteen Bottling Company, the perfect way to commemorate and celebrate life's most special occasions. Elevate your moments, savour the taste, and make them truly unforgettable with Wet Canteen. Head on over to wetcanteenbottlingco.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for your exclusive discount. Now, on with the show.
Listeners' discretion is advised, as we'll be talking about mental health issues. If anyone out there is struggling with any mental health issues, call Lifeline on 131114 and please reach out to your family and friends.
G'day! Welcome to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Bloom. Today's special guest is Senior Constable of the Western Australian Police, Stephanie Bochorsky, Star of Courage, and she has joined us today to tell her amazing story, and a story that has, on a fateful night in 2015, that changed her life forever and those who were surrounded by Steph as well. And she's joined us to tell us about that night and her life after service. So, hi, Steph. Welcome to the show. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, we've been trying to tee this up for a while. It's so good to finally get to record with you and share your story. And so before we get to that fateful night, Steph, can you share with us a little bit about you growing up as a young female in Western Australia, and what we like at school, what were your hobbies, and do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest of three siblings. I have an older sister and older brother. Growing up, I was always, my mum's best friend. Like, me and her were really quite inseparable. We're very much the same. She'd always told me that she had a boy, she had a girl, she had a boy, and then she had another one just to see what she'd get. Sorry, Mum. So I ended up with me. So yeah, that was a reason why I came into the picture. My dad was very hard worker growing up. I remember that he was tying down two jobs. So he was a full-time firefighter, as well as working for additional hours of money in Armour Guard. And my mum was a patient care attendant at Osborne Park Hospital. My highlight growing up, I think, when my dad was working out of Balcatta Fire Station, was a fire went through, Peter's ice creams, the drumstick.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God, the best. And there was a factory nearby the Balcatta facility at the time when I was really young, and he came home with a box of drumstick ice creams one morning, and one afternoon, sorry. And we're like, whoa, what are those? And he goes, yeah, they're just giving us free boxes of Peter's ice creams for I think it was for the whole summer, to be honest. So we had endless amounts of drumstick Peter's ice creams. And I remember that being a highlight when I was growing up. I thought, wow, it's awesome being a firefighter, bringing home free ice cream. Yes. And so, yeah, felt massive gratitude from that. I grew up in the suburb of Craigie, and I went to Craigie Primary School. And Also, I remember, when I was in pre-primary, we had a police officer that attended the class and spoke about his experience and spoke about, his contribution to not only wearing the uniform, but the impacts that he makes on the community. And I don't know, I just think from, an age of 10, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. But also, I think because my mum and dad obviously paved the way of, because they were in areas of work where they were giving back to the community. And I don't know, it just felt like the appropriate calling to me at that time. So yeah, nothing really else stood out in primary school. It was pretty cruisy, easy going. Up until high school, I think that's when everything changed a lot for me and the challenges that I faced. Yeah.
Well, let's touch on that now, Steph, where you mentioned high school, and you and I have spoken off air a lot about both sort of similar circumstances of being bullied in high school, and for you, the bullying was really intense. And did you feel that was like joining the police was a way of protecting the vulnerable and against those bullies, or was it something else how did you cope and how did you fight back against the bullies?
But yeah, really good question. Uh, it's a yes and no. I guess I'll start off by saying no. It wasn't really much the bullies that were my driving factor behind pursuing a career in policing, because that's what I wanted to do when that police officer. I feel so bad. I don't remember the name, but when the police officer came and spoke at the primary school, I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I knew that I needed to get the good grades to complete year 12 to be able to get into the police force, because you had to have like really good grades in English as well as maths, I think it was at that time. But in case you haven't noticed, I do have quite a deep husky voice. And for some reason, unbeknown to me, I can laugh about it now because it sounds so fucking ridiculous, right? But, at the time going through young girl, adolescence, going through puberty, but for some reason, the boys in my year thought it was funny to poke fun at my voice. And it wasn't until I showed up one morning in school and some boy in my year, as I'm walking past him, yells out, "Man," like this. And I thought, oh, what the heck was that? And then another boy would say it, and then another boy would say it, and then there'd be groups of boys in my year that would, just shout out "man." And it wasn't and it wasn't until the days and the weeks, and it happened a lot, that it came to understand that a rumor was passed around that apparently I was born a boy, and that's why I have the voice that I have. So I didn't understand it, and that's when I had my first, I guess, real true encounter of how am I going to cope and deal with such hurtful words. I mean, it's not like maybe to other people it wouldn't be such a letdown or a put down, but to me it was, because that's saying I was born a bloke when in fact I'm not. As I said, growing up, while you're trying to find your sense of identity and coming into, I guess, as a woman, that was very much challenged. And I turned to my mum and my dad for advice of how to cope during that situation and what to do. And the best advice given to me at that time was, the old saying, sticks and stones. So, Mum would always say, just ignore it, Steph, it's sticks and stones. But it just got a whole lot worse than how I'm describing it, because whenever I walked into a new class, that's when I felt like the nerves and the anxiety, and that would bubble up thinking, oh, how heavily am I going to be bullied today? And this is where I was also threw myself into sports. I was very, very active. I was into my netball. I was doing surfing. Within year 10 to 12, I was got into my martial arts. I was captain of the girls' AFL football team for 2 years as well at high school. And it wasn't until, from grades 8, 9 and 10 when, the best advice given to me was just ignore the bullies and ignore that behaviour and don't engage. It'll just, stop. I was walking back to my next class after an education class, outdoor education class it's called.
Yep.
One of the bullies was absolutely heckling the fucking shit out of me. Sorry, I know I keep swearing, but
That's all right. That's cool. We're just go for it, Steph. It's all good.
Oh, he was just, he was, really going at it. He was behind me, heckling me, and I was trying to just ignore it and keep walking forward. But I think when you're learning to cope through situations such as those, every person has a breaking point. And at that point, I think this happened in year 10 of dealing with this for the last 3 years. I think I reached my breaking point at that time. And that's when I turned around and I smacked the shit out of him. First time I acted out in a way of violence, and I know I'm laughing about it, but it's by no way or means was the right thing to do. But at that time, it was all because I went to a point of absolute desperation. That was the only way I knew how to act out. So after I smacked this guy in the face, I looked at the other boys who were also quietly heckling me, and they went silent and they were a bit shook. In that instance, I thought to myself, oh, good, maybe they're going to stop, verbally abusing me so much. And then that's when one of them said, see, she is a boy, she can fight. And so I made the situation a whole lot worse by acting out that way in the way I did. So no matter what I did, no matter how I acted, and, even going to the point of violence, it was very, very wrong. I felt in that moment I had no choice. So I coped by sticking with my friends who were fantastic. None of them really that I witnessed ever stood up to me, stood up for me, and they just remained silent whenever I got taunted. So I think I learnt from a very young age to stand my own ground and had no one else to rely on to defend myself. So I think from those experiences, I really did learn such a hard
life lesson. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And for you, what we should mention too, Steph, is that you've got a European background, which is a little bit different would make you sound a little bit, deeper voice. And that, like, I often, I know listening, I'm just like, because we've spoken off here a lot, and speaking of you with your bullying, I was exactly the same. I got to a point where I just turned around and just flogged them, and it was just, the old, I've never understood the sticks and stones, I got told the same thing. And now looking back on hindsight, I go, yeah, that's all well and good, but it doesn't work. Like, it's, like that you get to a point where you go, I've had enough, and I need to stand up for myself, and I need to fight. And it's because you and I have spoken about my book that I'm releasing later next year, and it's the inner fight. You fight back, and bullies are cowards, which all too well. They are cowards, and they prey on the vulnerable. And you were just going through a really time of growing up, which every teenager goes through exactly the same thing. We're trying to find who we are, and you just want to be left alone. And you just wanted to go about just growing up and just finishing school and going. And it's people, kids can be so cruel, which all too well because you've dealt with it as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? I said, even, in my, getting on now in my late 30s, and the experiences and challenges and obstacles that I've had over my life, I still think to this day, childhood bullies were probably the worst for me, because you're not adapted and you're not fully developed in the brain yet to know how to control those emotions or to know how to mitigate those problems and those issues. So it was very much a reminder to me later in life that I can see now why I acted out that way, and I can see why kids today act out in the ways that they do with disruptive behaviours and stuff like that. But I've also learnt to understand as well along the way that the ones that are bullying others there's obviously something very wrong with the environment that they're and things that they're internalizing now.
Yeah.
Whether that be their home environment, whether that be school, whether that be something that they're trying to dismiss or suppress. I've definitely come a long way to realize this now. So I think that's what's helped me overcome bullying or childhood bullying. Yeah.
And I think I think too, Steph, what it is that now you call bullies out now. Like you've got the intellect now to call them out and go, hey, no, that's not going to fly here. Like you treat people with respect. That's everyone's equal in this world, Steph. We are all equal in this world, and we've all, if like I'm one that since I've learned, and exactly what you're saying with the intellect, I was exactly the same. I was the easy target. I just fed the bullets into the machine gun and made it harder. But intellectually, I wasn't there. I just didn't have that brain development of what I've got now and the life lessons. And I call them life lessons back when like you, my biggest trauma comes from when I was a kid and when I was bullied and tormented. So I think a very key point you touch on there, that it's so important that kids who are struggling today and suffering bullying realize that it's not forever, and that there are people out there who have gone through similar that can help, and you're one of those people that certainly has gone through that and come out the other side, not without scars, but you've learnt to cope and you've learnt to deal with that situation, which hats off to you, because some people don't do that, Steph, and you've obviously done that and progressed through, which is great.
So, and I think when it comes to, with childhood trauma as well, the longer that kids leave it to deal with, it comes out in a lot of ways in the future with their emotions, whether that be toxic relationships, whether that be bad relationships within themselves, whether that be acting out in, addictions with alcohol abuse or drug abuse. It's so important to making sure that any kid that's going through it now, appropriate support is in place. So
Absolutely.
I guess that's why I'm very passionate about, if I ever see injustice or anyone being spoken down to, I am always one to speak up, because I don't care. You want to smack me, but no, I can't stand for behaviour like that. It's horrible.
No, and that's what I love about you, because I can see it. I can, and I will say to the listeners, Steph, good thing, I can definitely tell you're an absolutely beautiful human being, and you, like, to even be called a man. Are you kidding? Like, you're absolutely beautiful. So yeah, so
Yeah, well, I think because of what happened in high school and how much it did affect me, and it did affect me in my 20s, because I did end up going through taking advantage of my physical appearance a whole lot more than what I probably should have, like throwing myself dangerously into the gym too much, and cosmetic procedures and stuff like that. I think a lot of that comes. I've proceeded to go down the avenues of beauty and wanting to have like try to have a good appearance, is because of what happened back then.
yeah.
So I think, it's a double-edged sword, that. Yeah.
But what I mean too is you're beautiful in the sense of beautiful looking, but you're beautiful on the inside as well, which is a great trait to have with everything that you've had go on, which is great. And it's good to see that, because you could have gone the other way. You could have gone the total hard-nosed, I hate the world and this, but you haven't. You've chosen a different career and a different path, and it's been a rewarding, which we'll get into now as we progress in the interview. But yeah, it's my, like, straight away when I met you, I was like, I want to, Steph is someone that I can relate to. She's someone, and as I said to you, you've become a friend now. You really have become someone that I'm very grateful that you're in my circle, and it's as I say, it's absolutely great to sit here and actually get to record your story. It's a privilege. So, but let's talk about, you mentioned your mum, and how special your mum was, and we'll get to how important was your relationship with her, and how has that shaped you as a person and who you are today?
Yeah, I can't. There are no words, details, anything that I can say to explain how extraordinary my mum was. Like, honestly, she was the most. She was an angel on this earth. As cliche as that sounds, she really was. I'm so incredibly grateful and blessed that she was my mum. I'm already getting choked up. I'm sorry.
No, that's Steph. It's all good. Take your time. I know. Take your
Yeah,
time.
yeah. The only reason why I get choked up describing the person that she was, because whenever I think about my mum, I just think about the sacrifices, and I think about just how she was the rock of the family, and she did everything in her power for our family and for others who were in her support network. She was just such a caring and genuine person and never complained. Even when the times were tough, she never complained, never saw her complain. For instance, dinner time was always we always had it early. It was like 5 o'clock whenever we had dinner. And she would always be the last person to be seated at the dinner table. And she'd be the last to sit down at a meal, often sitting there alone, because we were always finished by the time that she sat down. But like I said, she never complained, but that's what she did. She made sure that, as a simple as making sure that everyone was fed before herself and putting others' needs before her. I noticed that. And she would always go above and beyond in instances, and in all instances, in every sense of the word and meaning of that, she always went beyond. She'd attend all of my netball games, rain, hail, or shine. She was there, including my brother's soccer games and my sister's netball games as well. She was there. My nana, so my dad's nana, who's Ukrainian, so that's my European background, Ukrainian. So she didn't have a driver's license. So my mum would every week, without fail, drive all the way up to where she lived to take her to go food shopping. And I would go along with her sometimes as well because I was very much inseparable from her. We just had this bond and we laughed like no other. We just had these stupid insider little jokes as well. And we would be sitting on the couch, tickling each other's feet. That was our thing. So that was us growing up. And yeah, I was blessed to have a best friend in my mum. No matter how old I get or how many children I may or may not have, I will always be my mum's little girl. And it's because of her kind nature. I think seeing what mum did for me and others is where I gained a lot of my empathy towards others, but also my sensitivity. She taught me to stand my ground and how to rise above it, all the bullshit, and not let anyone dim my shine. Yeah.
And we'll get to the story of your mum in a minute, and how what happened, and well, yeah, you're nearly making me cry. Actually, thanks, Steph. You're nearly making me cry. Yeah, yeah. Oh, just sounds like an incredible woman. And so, where where was your willingness to serve? Where did that come from? And you you mentioned that your dad was a firefighter. Did it ever cross your mind and your path that you would be a firefighter, or you'd go down into the military side of things, or was it always police for you? Where did that willingness to serve come from?
Yeah, so funny you mentioned that about the ADF as well, because at the time, I will touch onto it a little bit in more detail about, my mum, because that's a driving force behind the decision that got me into the policing to begin with. But when I went through high school, I was tossing up the idea of joining the ADF as well as pursuing a career in police. I felt at that time, especially in year 11 and 12, that I was very much torn between the two. But I just knew that it was like a burning desire within me that policing was my calling. Um, and probably because you've mentioned on it briefly as well with the bullying side of things. I think because I wanted to call out the bullies is probably why that's the driving force behind the policing career as well. But when I was 17, I knew that I couldn't leave WA in order to join the ADF. And I think with my dad working in the field of serving the community, being a firefighter, and my mum being a patient care attendant, and I think that giving back to others, it seemed like a natural path for me to take. And standing up to bullies in high school affected me in more ways than I realised at the time. And it carved my path to standing up to those who are vulnerable and to be the voice for those who are struggling to find their own. On or off duty, if I do hear someone or something being done inappropriate, I still can't stand by and just allow that to happen. It's not in my nature, nor will I ever turn a blind eye to such behaviour. So if anything, being exposed to that so young, there needs to be individuals out there to hold out a helping hand to those who are constantly being kicked down. And despite background, despite journey, despite if people want the help or not, I've always been a person that will hold that space for others suffering and let them know I'm right here if you need me. And I will always continue to do that. And I definitely think that I get that self-reflection from how I was brought up by my mum and dad.
And I think I can see that firsthand, and probably to a little bit to your detriment, I'll say that you put others. You probably care a little bit too much for others, Steph, and don't put your own needs. When you need a hand, I can tell you go sometimes. Nah, it's all good. I'm good. I've got it. And it's sometimes you need to take the advice you give to others and look after yourself too. And I'm the same. I do exactly the same. I know exactly what and you've done it for me. You've reached out to me heaps of times and said, "Hey, mate, you're good. Checking in. You're good." And that is to you. I thank you so much because you've helped me out so much, and it's been amazing to meet you and just get to know you and as I said, call you a friend, and I don't use that term loosely. You are a close friend of mine, and that's it's so rare to have people that actually understand and get you, and you do that. So yeah, I can tell why you chose that. You were right. The burning desire to serve and go in the police, you chose the right path because you absolutely have that willingness to help others, and it's a credit to you and should be commended. So well done.
And back at you.
Oh, thanks.
Too.
So, Steph, let's talk about 2008. You joined in December 2008. You joined the WA Police, and what was your time like at the academy, and how were some of these challenges that you faced at the academy, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, oh man, the police academy was one of the shittest, but one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. No, honestly, it was good. There were parts that were, like I said, shit, but there were parts that were so good. I've met, friends to today. And the fact that I made, the fact that I after losing my mum, she was the drive. Yeah,
we'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. That's.
She was the drive behind a lot of the coping strategies and challenges that I did face within the academy whenever I came up to an obstacle. So whenever I was challenged with an obstacle, I would just say to myself, "Make mum proud. Make mum proud." And that was the driving force behind everything whenever it was too tough or I felt like I was on the verge of tears, which during that time I never allowed myself to do. And I've never also been one for exams. So that was probably one of the hardest things for me was the bloody law exams. Because I have always strongly believed, and even to this day, that whatever grade I received in a written exam was never a true accurate form of one's intelligence. Graded exams don't test your intelligence. It just tests your ability to memorize, really. That's the way I see it.
Yep.
Hence why I'm always about genuine connections, building rapport with others, having people comfortable in your presence in order to open up to me. And they spoke about that a lot, about verbal judo. So being able to talk down and escalating situations. Now, I would much prefer to work alongside someone who's able to talk to people from a compassionate and understanding a way than someone that's going to go, oh, get down from that roof because you're not following section blah 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 of the crim code. It just didn't make sense to me. So I've really paid attention to how people acted the way they did. And, why is this person irritated? Why does this person look so sad? Why am I asking so many questions? Because, I would get, pulled up on that a lot, like, Steph, you ask too many questions.
But how do you learn, Steph? How do you learn if you don't ask?
That's right. I remember a copper saying to me once when I had my first posting, he goes, Steph, I'm going to call you Beyonce from now on. And I'm like, why? And he goes, oh, that song, Question? How do I know how the song goes? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know the song. Yeah, I know the song. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It was hilarious when he said that. But yeah, it really got me onto the path of, in the back of my mind was I was intrigued by the human behaviour and what makes people tick. And I was also, one of the fittest women in my squad. I loved PE. This was probably my favourite aspects of the police academy. And I think this is probably, because I was so fit, I think, was because I went through a breakup, I think, 2 years before I eventually got into the police. And my long-term boyfriend at that time always complained about me taking up too much netball. I think I was doing it 5 to 6 days a week. And I told him that I was interested in getting back into kickboxing because that's what I was doing in school, kickboxing and Muay Thai. But he pretty much threatened to leave me if I got into martial arts and taking on too much exercise. So that's when I ended up getting a bit fat and lazy and not feeling good within myself. And then we ended up breaking up. I mean, that was bound to happen. But as soon as that relationship ended, I drove to my nearest martial arts academy and I would train there 4 hours a day. So I think my passion for that definitely was a drive behind me being able to be one of the fittest in my squad, because I was at one of my lowest a couple of years before that. And I do remember one of there was one tough moments that sticks out to me. During the police academy was we were getting ready to, because every week you got to practice your parade, which is your marching for graduation day. So on this particular day, there's a particular person in my squad who was the squad leader, and with total disregard and lack of compassion and, very much ego-driven approach, came up to me on the parade ground and shouted in front of me and my squad leaders, "Steph, take that ring off." And I looked back at him and, was wondering why he's, yelling at me in front of everyone and with such hostility. We had a strict jewellery and hair rules that applied during the police academy. And I think at that time, because it wasn't a wedding band, and I think that was the only exception, which is why I called out and noticed it. It was the first time he noticed it in I don't know how many weeks. It struck a chord with me, and that was because of not only the approach and the hostility of being confronted. The ring was very much something close to me because my mum gave that to me. And when she passed on the day that I sat the police exam,
yes,
there was no way that I was taking that ring off, because it was my constant reminder that I was doing it for her and that I was pushing my grief aside in order to pursue the career that I really wanted to do since I was 10. So I think I ended up yelling back at him, get fucked or something. And I ended up having to speak with the squad leaders for my reasons behind why I reacted back at him with such hostility as well, because it was something close to me and obviously meaningful. And the fact that this person in my squad tried to assert his authority over me when we're meant to be equals, they're meant to be in this together. I just thought, nah, not today, Felicia. Nope. So I was allowed, long story short, I was allowed to keep that ring on once it was explained.
Which
that was a tough moment.
Oh, absolutely. And well, as I said, you face some, when I said the question, that you face some challenges that absolutely, like losing your mum on the final, like as you're sitting your final exams on that day, like Steph, I don't know how you even coped to concentrate to pass those exams, because you're trying to deal with your mum's like passing away as you're sitting to do your dream job. Like the resilience you show there, like I sat there, and as I was reading that in your story, I just went, like, most people would break and wouldn't, the resilience you've shown to not only continue and thrive and make your dream a reality. As I say, most people would just stop and just break, and you didn't do that. And that shows, like, straight away, that's you're a fighter, and that's, the old, you are a fighter, and you wanted to you overcame that adversity to just keep pursuing that. And it came true. You marched out as a police officer. And I just want to go back a sec, because I didn't ask this. How long was like the academy like for your training?
I think you're going through full-time or 6 months training. It's either 6 to 9 months. Yeah, that's testing my memory there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's a big, it's a big commitment. And for you, how is that satisfaction of you passed your exams? And I say that in the sense of, like, going back to that guy, like, to me, you don't need to be called out in front of everyone. He could have done that quietly. Like, that's not great leadership. That's really poor leadership. And that he could have pulled you aside and said, "Hey, Steph, why have you got that ring on?" Not do it in front of you. Do it in front of your peers. That's just not right. It's like you say, ego or whatever he was thinking. But I'm glad that you got to keep your ring, because it's important. And then you graduate. And what was that like? How was that moment for you? With obviously bittersweet that you'd passed, but your mum wasn't there, but you knew she was there in spirit. But what was that like for you when you'd finally graduated and you were about to start your dream career?
Yeah, so I missed her so much because she was my number one cheerleader. She was, like I said, she was the driving force behind pursuing this career, because like I've previously mentioned, I wanted to do this since 10, and I just wanted to make her proud, and obviously make my dad proud too, because my dad is such a hard critic as well, being a tough Ukrainian background. So I did miss her so much on the graduation day, and I'm sure that you're probably going to well up as well, Adam, when I say this, but I don't care who you are, whether you're a first responder or not. As soon as you hear those bagpipes going,
oh, gee, stop it!
I told you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. It's
hear the bagpipes going, whether that be graduation, whether that be a memorial service, whether that be a funeral, it just strikes a chord within you, and it bubbles emotions to the service, whether that be grief, whether that be an enormous sense of pride. And in that moment, as I was marching on that parade ground, I was thinking to myself, fuck, I made it. How the fuck did I get through this? because me too. I don't know how I coped with it, especially losing my mum on the day of sitting the police exam. But I just knew that I had to push my feelings aside, because she wouldn't have wanted me for that to get in the way, because I'd been wanting to do it since I was, so young. And a lot of people don't know is I actually sat the police exam 3 times before I eventually got in. So I wasn't going to take no for an answer either. So when I was on the parade ground and the bagpipes are bloody going, and the tears started rolling down my face, I'm thinking to myself, oh, Steph, stop it. Don't let anyone see this. I don't want anyone to see my vulnerability in those moments. Especially, when I got accepted into the police, I was met with my dad. Even though I was very proud to have graduated and gotten through, it was hard not having her there because of how hard of a critic my dad is. I love my dad, but he is very much a hard critic, because I remember when I got the acceptance letter, I was like, Dad, look, I got into the police. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, Steph, but you have to pass. You have to graduate. Dad, look, I passed. I'm graduating this week. Oh, yes, but, you have to get off probation. Hey, Dad, I got off probation early. Oh, yes, but you still have a long career ahead. I was always, I was never getting that. Recognition is probably the wrong word, but I was never
Praise.
support.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the way that I really wanted. And I know that I would have gotten that from my mum. And that's not to say that that's my dad's fault, because my dad communicates a whole lot differently to how my mum did. But I just felt like I was always never reaching that point of just hearing those words from my dad, I'm so proud of you. And I think that was a very difficult, challenging time too.
But I think, Steph, in the long run, it's actually made you who you are. Like, it's actually it's part of, like, it's built your character to who you are now and what you do now, and what we'll talk about that later on. But it's helped you, and it's made. But was there a time after your graduation, and this is something, was there a time that you actually did deal with your mum's death? You actually, like, once you'd passed your sworn officer, was there a time where you actually did actually confront it and say, I actually need to grieve now, that I need to process what has happened?
It wasn't until because the only way I knew how to cope was to remain focused on my career. And I think, as a lot of police officers, emergency service workers, we tend to do that. We tend to suppress our own emotions, our own biases and grief. And I think not fully embracing her loss was how I was able to remain focused, and it's what got me through. So although it got me through, it also was it got me through, and I'm thankful that it did. But it wasn't until years later of when this incident that we're going to get to and talk about, it wasn't until then that I really had to be confronted with the emotions of dealing with my mum, and because of that, and being forced into, I guess, the spotlight, because that's how my psychologist has explained to me. He goes, Steph, the spotlight needs to be turned away from others onto yourself. And I just went, oh. So even right now, I'm sweating under the armpits now thinking about it, because as soon as the spotlight's put on you, you just, you retract. You're like, nah, this is uncomfortable. Don't like this.
Yep.
And I didn't, because as a police officer, as you know, Adam, you are pretty much trained to think in those early stages through your probation that you have to not only enforce the law, but you have to be an upstanding citizen as well. and you have to be seen as though you're doing the right thing all the time and that you're a strong, hard, wide person.
Yep.
And I fell into that. I fell into that deeply about, no, I'm going to remain like, I guess, unreadable. I was unapproachable in my early years, in my early career. I probably had the resting bitch face down to a pact because I didn't want others to see in me. I say, yeah.
Like a weakness. You didn't want them to see a weakness. You were
Yeah.
hard there. And like I get what you mean, Steph. Like I totally get it. Like it's, you're now going out to protect and serve, and this is it now. Like you're focused. You've got that laser focus. This is what I need to do. This is my job, and everything else is just pushed aside. This is what I'm doing now. This is me. This is the new Steph. This, like the old Steph, the vulnerable young Steph. She's no longer there. This is me, hard nosed, in your face. Let's go. This is what I'm a sworn officer, and I'm going to protect and serve no matter what the cost is. And that's how I read it. That's exactly how I'm reading it with what you, and I can see it because we all fall, especially defense, emergency services personnel, we all fall into that. That's what we do. That's what we do. That's our job. And 100%, I know exactly what you're saying. So you graduate, and then you go. Your first posting is to Ellenbrook. Is it Ellenbrook? Yeah, Ellenbrook Police Station as an inquiry and patrol officer. What do you remember about your first station, and what challenges did you face here that helped you going down, that would help you further on down the track in your career?
So, Ellenbrook Police Station was my first posting. I was so thankful to receive a station posting because most people, when they leave the police academy, their first posting is usually booze bus traffic. Unfortunately, I didn't get to escape that. I still had to do it. But, I was very thankful that my first posting was at Ellenbrook Police Station, and I had a fantastic supervisor. God rest his soul. His name was Sergeant Paul Beccarelli, who sadly passed away last year. I attended his funeral last year. He was an amazing leader, and someone who was the first person who I'd met within my career in policing that I felt comfortable to go to about any issue or any situation whatsoever. And, sadly, as a probationer that's fresh and new and trying to learn the ropes, because that's pretty much your first lesson. It's not the academy. They do tell you that when you leave the police academy, your actual learning starts at your first posting. And God, was that true, because Ellenbrook was my first exposure to sexual harassment by another senior officer. I was alone with this particular officer in the patrol car when he asked me, do I spit or swallow? And I told him that was very inappropriate, and he kept on insisting that I answered the question, which I never did. And in that moment, I just didn't know what to do. So I just laughed because I didn't want to cause any awkward tension between us as well, because we're in the car alone. So I just laughed it off and tried to fob it off and tried to, divert the question away from something else and not cause any friction. And it put me in such an awful and uncomfortable position. And it wasn't until I approached Sergeant Beccarelli and I told him about it, because he was the only one that I felt comfortable at the station to talk about it at the time. And he encouraged me to actually pursue with a formal complaint, which I didn't know the process of how to go about that. And he supported me every step of the way through that formal complaint, with helping with my writing skills, which I know I'm not the best at. I'm horseshit at writing, and I will always be horseshit at writing. I'm not good at it. But he helped me, and he helped me and he reminded me of the support that was in place. And I remember that when that happened to me at the time, and when I issued the complaint, he continued with his behaviour. Unfortunately, I thought that, my complaint would get far, and I don't think it did. I can't remember what happened with it. I think he had to have retraining. But he did end up doing it to another 2 female officers, from what I heard, when I got re-interviewed further down the lines with his inappropriate conduct towards a surviving breast cancer patient, as well as a cadet, female cadet, so young female cadet, which makes me disgusted even thinking about it now. But thankfully he's now kicked out of the police force, because there's no place for people like that, especially in the police force. And I'm just annoyed that other women had to be exposed to such disgusting behaviour after mine, and he was never really held accountable for it at the time. That's just, I'm just so glad that he's now gone. And what a challenge that I had to yet again be exposed to so early into my career. But by meeting genuine people like Sergeant Beccarelli, who stood up, he could have told me, you know what, Steph, that's just guys being guys. Just, it's the man's workplace. Just get over it. He could have gone down that avenue, but he didn't. He came from such a caring, supportive, gentle approach that it really shaped me into what kind of officer I wanted to be if any other officer faced similar challenges, or anything that was, traumatizing to them at the time, if they felt like they weren't going to be taken seriously by other authority figures.
I'm glad you had that support, Steph, because that's disgusting. Like, that is just that. I'm sorry. I'm a man, and I will support you 100% in that. That's just wrong. There's no, like, you are, like you said, you're there to protect and serve. Like, that's like, if that behavior has got to be called out, because if, like, you're trying to enforce the law on us citizens, that's wrong, and yet that's, so I no, I'm 100% in agreement with you. I think it's just disgusting, and he's just low. And like, I'm glad he's no longer a police officer, and we won't mention his name. We're not gonna mention his name, but I'm glad he's no longer a serving police officer, because it is an honor to serve in any emergency service, regardless of what it is, Steph, whether it's police, fire, ambulance, or defense. It's a privilege. It's not and it's an honor to do what we do, and not everyone can do it. And I could get on my high horse here, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna, I'm glad you had that support. I really am, because once again, you had to overcome adversity again, and that's hard. You in your first posting, like, that's your first posting, and I'm glad that your sergeant had that thing to say, no, Steph, I back you all the way, because it's not the boys' club. It's not, it's not how things are done. And I'm glad you had that support. And then you face that challenge, and then in 2010, you still have a willingness to serve again, and you talk about the military, and you join the Army Reserve. Can you share us, where did this come from, and how did this help in your policing career with the skills, and what was basic training like after the academy? Was it harder? Was it easier? What do you remember of your time at Kapooka?
So people that went through Kapooka would have been like, oh, this is the fucking worst experience of my life, getting woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning with, especially the poor lads that have, the I can't say it, but when you're getting woken up so early in order to parade, and I was already in the police force before joining the Army Reserves, so that was in 2008 when I joined. So I think I joined the Army Reserves in 2010. So I would have been in the police for 2 years. And I remember having a conversation with a colleague who said that they were in the Army Reserves and that the WA Police support military leave. And I thought to myself, beauty, because, it'd always been in the back of my mind, what if I pursued a career in pursuing ADF full time, and having that in the background of my mind constantly, having successfully getting into the police, I thought, what better way to see if this is something that I like by doing this part time. So I joined the Army Reserves as I thought that this was such a good opportunity to spend my spare time as well. Basic training, it wasn't hard for me because I found it actually funny, because I love the black humour. I loved the corporals at Kapuka who were all about throwing insults, and I fitted right into that because I loved it. I thought it was humorous. I remember one morning we were all marching to conduct training in the F-89 Minimi firearm training. And as we were marching, this corporal starts marching up next to me and she goes, "Private Bochorsky." "Yes, Corporal. Thank you for taking down my washing this morning." "You're welcome, Corporal. I hope that you didn't sniff any of my clothes." And I went, "No, Corporal, I had to fight the urge." And it wasn't in that split second that she broke her stern authority and she began laughing. And it was just so good. It's just such a good moment to have because she was a fiery woman. I loved her. But just having that banter and that dig at each other, I love it. I miss it. I miss it so much, and I can see why so many of our Defence Force personnel, or serving members, why they continue on longer than past the hopes of how long they would have stayed in, is because of that mateship, and it's because of that connection, because the mateship and the connection in the Army is so completely different to the police, and I'll say that to this day, because even on graduation day within the at Kapuka, one of the head ponchos there, he started saying something, and then among our ranks I was the one laughing. And he didn't even need to ask who it was. He just yells out, "Private Bochorsky, is that you laughing again?" I was like, "Yes, Corp," or "Yes, sir," or whatever I said.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. The mateship is just something that I loved, and going through Kapuka and I guess having the early exposure within the police and the authority figures, and no matter what the direction is, you do it. You do as you're told. I think I was able to get through Kapuka quite well, because I knew that, look, you do as you said, don't argue, and it's only how many weeks and you'll come out the end of it. And that's exactly what we did. And I have to this day, even with the Army, I have the bestest mates. One of my girlfriends, she's one of my bestest friends, and she's been my biggest supporter through everything. And yeah, I miss the reserves so much.
And I guess it would help you as you're back out on the streets. It probably sharpened a few of your skills and probably made you actually a better police officer. Would you agree with that? Would you say it probably did make you a better police officer?
Yeah, I think it definitely did. I think, with the fact of it was common structure to the police of, if you have someone who's of a higher rank than you, and gives you a sense of direction, or tells you to do something or a task, you just do it. And I think with that being similar with the Army, it definitely did help in the early stages of my policing career as well. Definitely, yeah. Yeah.
And I think too, like, I know exactly what you're talking about with the black humor, and we've all got it. Like the feds, an emergency person, we have just we've got we've got a dark sense of humor, and people look at it and go, who aren't in, they go, are you guys sane? And you go, well, maybe not. Who knows? Like it's just how you cope. It's just, it too. It's just how you cope. It's how you cope with the situations. And people who aren't in that space and that field don't understand it. And they never will. They never will, because they're not, most of them don't face life and death situations that first responders and defense personnel have to face. And it's, like you, day to day, it's day emergency services, day in, day out. That's the job. That's the nature of the business. We as much as Steph, we hope that it never happens, but it does. That's just the nature of what being a first responder is. You never know what you're gonna go into. And for you, is there any? Well, we'll get to what happened in 2015 in a minute, but going back in your earlier days, is there any scenarios and situations that you remember most that affected you before going into what we're about to talk to?
I think there's two that stand out to me. And one of them was because I was still a probationer, and I think this was the first 338 that I attended. So 338 is, basically when someone's deceased, when someone's died. And I remember the call coming in, and this was in a retirement village, and there was a call that came in that a little girl is banging on the door saying, "Daddy's fixing the roof." And it wasn't until the next door neighbours, an elderly couple, came to try and unlock the door, and they couldn't unlock the door because it was locked. Then they had to force it open. And that's when they got the little girl out, and they noticed him hanging from a beam in the middle of the living room. Now, when we got to the scene, I remember having to take statements, having to speak to, the last, basically just conducting our investigation as such. And the place was horrible. He looked like he had probably passed the night before, just on the coloration of his skin and his tongue. And you could see through observing and conducting a search of the house, once the little girl was obviously out and me and my offsider were there, that you could see that she was really trying to raise his attention by, there was feces in her potty in the corner of the room. There was cut up $20 notes and $10 notes on the table. The place was just in such a place of array and smelt, and you could just see through observing the room that the little girl was trying to do what she could do to try and wake her dad up. That's kind of how I interpreted the scene. So after taking statements and after doing that, I ended up going next door to see her, because I had to go get some new clothes for her too, because she was still in her pajamas, and she was they were dirty and messy. So I don't even know how long she was there for, to be honest. I think it might have been a couple of days. And I brought some clothes over to her, and she was eating at the table, and I was playing with her hair, I think, because I was stroking her hair at one point. I don't know why I was doing that. Because she was playing with her hair and she wanted me to show us. I was putting clips in her hair, and then I was stroking that with her. And then I said to her, "Do you want to see what your hair looks like?" And she goes, "Yeah." So she puts her arms up like that. So I pick her up and take her into the mirror of this couple's bathroom, and she turns at me with a big grin on my face, and she goes, "Daddy's fixing the roof," like this. And my heart sunk, because it was at that moment that I know that she didn't understand or fully understand that her dad's gone. How am I going to approach this conversation with this little girl? Because she was only 5 or 6 at the time. I did learn from taking statements and that at the time that her mum was actually a heavy drug addict, and she's no longer in Perth. I think she was in Sydney or Melbourne seeking treatment, and she doesn't even know that that was her mum. She thought it was her older sister, so I don't even think she knew that she had a mum. So when she said that to me and turned with that big grin on her face, I thought to myself, what's going to happen with this little girl? Can I take her home myself? Even though that I was a young 21-year-old. Because I think that she was end up going to go into foster care because no one could look after this little girl. And we didn't deal with that properly because, we didn't even get like a proper debriefing from the officer at the station. What I heard from, veterans in the police forces, back in the day, whenever we went to something so confronting or traumatic, you'd sit around and have a couple of beers. Whereas, as time progressed in the police force, I think they're starting to introduce it back now with, making sure you're putting appropriate measures in place as opposed to, drinking. But at that time when I went through, it was frowned upon and we didn't have those debriefings, which I think would have helped to be able to talk it out and talk through exactly what was seen and how each person was coping after, being confronted with something so traumatic. And I went to footy training because I was playing footy at the time, and I went to footy training that night. And I remember one of the girls saying something to me, and I just turned around, I snapped at her, I told her to fuck off. She's like, "Whoa, what's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I've had a bad day at work. Just leave me the fuck alone." So all the girls, I think, were a bit intimidated and threatened by how I was talking to them, and that was so wrong of me too. And I remember after training that night, I ran laps after laps after laps after laps. I can't even tell you, Adam, how long I was there for. That really affected me, that little girl. And that thought will always sit with me because it was probably, it was my first 338, but also, having to have such a hard conversation with such a little girl, with a girl that's, so vulnerable and doesn't fully understand what's happening.
Yep.
That was challenging.
Oh, absolutely. And like, Steph, I'm sitting across from you, and I'm looking at that myself going, as an adult, how do you even compute that to someone so young and not to have a debrief afterwards? Like, you need to decompress yourself, and to not have that, there's only so much that you can compartmentalize that, Steph. You can't, that can only get to a certain point, and then you need to let it out. And you letting it out the way you did in the reaction of, saying, being withdrawn and saying fuck off, and that, I understand it. I get it, because you need to have an outlet, and you need to be able to, you need to decompress. That's so important. That's not a normal human thing that you went to that day. And especially at 21, Step, you're 21, you're still developing yourself. You're still developing in you as an adult. So yeah, I totally understand it. And I totally get why and that would surface later, which we'll get to later on. And now we're going to talk about this fateful morning this, Steph, when I first read this, I'm going to take a moment here, because this is really, it actually, every time I read it, it nearly brings me to tears. Yeah,
Right. It's okay.
Yeah. In the early hours of the 28th of August 2015, you rescued two young children who were covered with fuel and set alight at a house in Doubleview, Western Australia. Steph, can you share with us that fateful day and what happened?
Yeah, so there's going to be a part in this story where I'm probably going to have a bit of a breather and to talk it through,
Yeah.
take my time to talk through as well, because no matter how many times I have spoken about this story, there's a part in there that really gets me. So
Yeah. Yeah, Steph. No, that's
just a word of warning.
yeah, that's fine.
So I had just finished night shift. I was working at a Perth police station at that time. And yeah, I just come off night shift or coming out of rotation of night shift. And at that time, I was unwinding. I was in my pajamas. I was living in Doubleview at the time, which I only moved into 2 weeks prior to this incident happening as well. And I had a movie on pause in my bedroom, which is situated at the back of the house. But in the front living room, at that time, I was really into my UFC. And there was a special documentary on in regards to a comeback fight between one of my two favourite fighters. And I thought to myself, oh, I have to watch this. So I'm watching that, and yeah, my lounge room is situated at the front of the house, which faces the road and out in the street. And I hear, screaming, so I turn the volume on the remote down and on the TV down. And I go to the front door and I opened up the front door, but I've also got a fly screen door, so I'm looking out the fly screen door, and I can hear a woman and a man yelling across the road from me. I could see into their house, their door, because I was elevated and it's slight slope, so I could see down, and I could only see the front door. But there was a man pacing to and from the front door, and he was in his underwear. But a woman in a pink dressing gown was also pacing to and from the front door, and she was saying words to the effect of, "No, don't be silly. I love you. Don't be silly." And he was shouting out, "The Maoris are going to get me." And I thought to myself, sounds like, a domestic situation. It just sounds like a couple having an argument. I'm just going to not do anything at this point, as it just seems like he might be drunk or something, because I think it was a Friday night as well, from memory. So I left the wooden door open, but kept the fly screen door closed, just so I could hear that if it was to escalate, that I'd make a phone call or something, or intervene whatever way I had to. So I sat back down, and it wasn't even a minute had passed, and this blood curdling scream I heard, and yeah, I get shivers and I get goosebumps even thinking of her scream. And I remember running out onto the porch and yelling out across the road, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" And she looked up at me and she goes, "No, he's setting my kids on fire." So that's when I just didn't think, I just ran. I ran across the road, I ran past her, and as I ran past her, I said to her, "No one is to come in after me. Please call the police." So she looked at me in absolute helplessness, and I don't know this house. I've never been to this house, but what I do remember is when I ran in, my attention was drawn to the right-hand side. My peripheral vision went there, and the room was alight, and I could smell petrol in the air. So I ran into that room because that's where I could see it was lit up. And as I entered the room, there was a cot against the wall, and the 3-year-old, she was 3 at the time, she's standing up in her cot and her whole head was engulfed in flames. It would have been like a meter above her head. So her whole head was on fire. And I just screamed out, "Oh my God." And I grabbed a blanket from her cot. I threw it over her head. I doused the flames. And as I'm doing this, I felt a presence from behind me. And as I turned to look behind me, unbeknown to me at the time, it was their dad. And he was standing there naked. He had a red jerry can, and he's pouring petrol on his 8-year-old little girl as he's looking at me. And as I'm trying to get the 3-year-old little girl out from her cot, and she's holding on to me for dear life at that point in time. She was really hanging on to my neck. So I'm holding her with one hand. And I like I said, I was in my pajamas. I didn't know when backup was. I didn't have anything to protect me. And he was a big dude. He was big. And I thought to myself, well, I don't have anything to protect myself. I'm holding a vulnerable little girl as well. I need to use my verbal judo. So I just told him I just said, get the fuck away from her, fuck off. And he turned to me and he looked at me with such blackness in his eyes and says, why don't you take your clothes off? And I ignored that because I thought, this guy's on another level. I don't know what's happening here. And I was saying to the other little girl that was laying in the bed in the same bedroom, who was still being flooded with petrol in her face, come on, sweetie, get up. And I'm wondering, why isn't she communicating? Why isn't she listening? So I had to lean and creep in closer towards him, and I managed to get the collar of her pajamas, the back of her collar, and I dragged her out of the bed backwards, and I ran out of the house with the 2 girls. And I didn't look back. And as we got out the front door, the mum was there distraught, and some neighbours were also with her, comforting her. And I said to her, look, I'm really worried about your 3-year-old little girl here. Well, I didn't say 3-year-old, but I said, I'm trying not to say names because I have to be very, very careful with names here because their names don't want to be said. So that's why I'm saying ages. I said, I'm very worried about your little girl here. I'm taking her across the road to my house. So as we're walking across to my house, I could smell the burnt flesh. She was just sobbing. She wasn't making a sound. As we got to my house, I took her into the bathroom and I sat her on the bench to get a towel to wet it. And just to apply some of the just coolness to her face because it was so raw and red. And it wasn't until I unbuttoned a couple of her top buttons of her pajamas that I noticed it was black. So she had already been pretty badly burnt. And this is the moment that I said that.
Take a break. It's
okay. It always gets me because she wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was just sobbing. And in those moments, she entrusted me to take care of her. And I'll never forget that. And I'll never forget the bravery that she displayed by just sobbing. And I thought, damping this towel is doing nothing. I need to get her into the shower. So I had a shower at that house. It was a shower that is over a bathtub. So I turned on the shower and I held her again. I said, look, sweetie, I'm going to put you into the bath. And she wouldn't let go of me. So that's when I took off my socks and I was about to get into the shower with her fully clothed, if that was the only way to get her in. But she saw the water and she let go of me. So I sat her down in the bathtub. As the water's running, I quickly ran into the living room to grab my phone to let the St. John's ambulance know that she was in the house with me, just so they knew to come to my house as well as the other house, because I wasn't sure if they had been called yet. And I got off the phone with them and I'm sitting down and I'm trying to comfort her as best as I could. And I'm wondering to myself, why isn't she looking up at me? Well, and then it was in that realization that I remember that her neck had actually melted into her skin and she physically couldn't lift her head because her skin had melted. and her looked like one of her ears had been burnt completely off as well. Not to mention, the blackness on her body. And that was very overwhelming at the time, but I just knew that I had to be a strong support for her in those moments. And a female officer that I know, I heard her calling from the front door, and she comes in and she goes, "Steph, are you in here?" I said, "Yeah, I'm in the bathroom, come into the bathroom." And she came in the bathroom and she took one look at her, and the colour from her skin immediately drew from her. It just went pale white. And I said to her, "You okay?" And she goes, she just froze. And I said, "It's okay, just let the St. John ambulance know that she's in here. Please go out and just make sure to bring them in here." And she couldn't even compose her words, that poor female officer. And then they eventually came in. They took her into the ambulance, and I went back outside, and I spoke with a sergeant that I knew from one of the stations as well, and he came up and he asked if I was okay. And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, mate. I just can't believe it. Someone would do such a thing." And it was in that moment that he's been walked up the driveway in handcuffs, and he makes eye contact with me. And I'll never forget this either. Is he looked at me and he said, "Oh, here she is. Here's the fighter," as if to have known what I was watching on TV at the time. It was just a very bizarre comment to have made, and that's something that's very unsettling, making a comment such as that. And and then the detectives came, but I'll talk about that a bit next, in the next question that you wanted to ask me and address me on in regards to that. But I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep. One of my best friends at the time came over and helped me. And I said to her, "Look, I want to go to the hospital and see them all because I can't sleep. I'm not going to sleep." So the next day, the next morning, I went to the hospital with my friend and to visit the kids. And at that time, she was put into an induced coma. The 8-year-old little girl, I found out there of why she wasn't responsive to me was because she has severe autism and she's non-verbal, so she couldn't communicate with me. So that was another thing. And I noticed as well a little boy who was in another room who ran out in time, thank God. So I didn't even know that there was another little boy in the house. And I turned to the mum, and she's still in her pink dressing gown, and I said to her, are you okay? And she turns to me and she says, "I have to leave him, don't I?" As if to asking me for advice or words of encouragement. And I thought to myself, well, fucking of course you leave him. But I was so unaware of domestic violence at that time and how prominent it is in our community, and having that first-hand exposure into that. And I said to her, "Well, what do you think? If someone someone that I love, that I'm married to, if they ever did that to my kids, that's unexcusable to me. I mean, how do you move past that?" And she's like, yeah, I know. And that's what got me into the facility, or got me into the interest of domestic violence later on in my career. But with the little girl, on examination, and what I found out later is that she had mixed, partial and full thickness burns to her body, including her head, neck, face, right upper arm, right and left hand, right shoulder and chest. She had 13% of her body surface area which was burnt, and an inhalation components. She required immediate resuscitation, intubation and ventilation, pain management, edema control and specialist wound care, and required multiple surgical interventions with debridement and skin grafts. She also required general anaesthetic for dressing changes and for investigations of the burn damage to her vocal cords and her right ear. She's permanently scarred as a result of her injuries, and she's not permitted to spend long periods of outside. She couldn't play like other children, and she has to wear compression garments. She has to have ongoing emotional, psychological problems, and she had psychological problems with fear, anxiety, hypervigilance, and low self-esteem. Her 8-year-old little girl has severe autism. Not only does she have a disability, but when she was taken to hospital to treat the petrol poured into her eyes, mouth, and ears, she displayed trauma, and it's hard for her to communicate, and it makes it difficult for her carers to treat her, as well as their little boy having cancer, affected by what had happened and having to attend counselling. Mum ended up being diagnosed with PTSD and struggles with anxiety and depression. And she mentioned at the time that his actions had broke her heart into many pieces. And I just want to mention as well that the mum, she copped a lot of abuse and disgraceful comments on Facebook and social media in regards to what she did and why she didn't jump in. Can I tell you, she did what she had to do, and she asked for help. So the fact that she came out and asked for help was the right thing to have done at that time, because if she had not done that, she would have been a statistic along with those kids, and she did do the most admirable thing that you could do, and she asked for help. So I was deeply offended when she was copping so much hate from so many members of the community about why she didn't act in another way, but she acted in the best way possible. And it just breaks my heart knowing that the little girl has, her skin doesn't grow, and the fact that those are constant reminders that the person that's meant to support her, is meant to be her ultimate protector, did this to her, just breaks my heart.
Steph, you can see it from you can see it on the screen. That whole time you were talking through that night, I've just had tears rolling down my eyes, like rolling down my cheeks, to think that someone who is a human being could do this to an innocent child and their own child. It's just, you can't comprehend it. And it's just, I just, there's no words. I can't believe that someone would do this. Like, that's just, and they've robbed their daughter, well, they've robbed their kids of a normal upbringing of life that, and as a parent, Steph, which because we'll get to that later, you've now become a mum and you've got a beautiful baby daughter. Your job as a parent is to protect their innocence till they, can fend for themselves. And this low-life piece of shit has robbed not only one daughter, but his other daughter and his son, and put onto his partner as well. That, and I won't mention his name because he's below even mentioning his name. People that want to go and look it up. It's absolutely sickening. And yeah, Steph, on behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for what you did that day. That is just pure courage. You were unarmed, you had no backup, and you did something that most people couldn't do. And I say that and those girls are alive today, Steph, because of what you did. And I, as you say, I'm glad you mentioned the mother, because she's the forgotten person in this as well. And you and I have spoken about this in depth a lot on the phone before coming on the podcast. She copped a lot of flack, but she did what she could, because some people can't do what you did. They just they don't have it in them to do what you did. And yeah, Steph, I just want to say thank you for what you did. It just, yeah, I'm broken. The words, I'm just broken. I'm absolutely broken from just, that just breaks my heart.
Yeah, and she did what was best to survive. And that's what many of our women and children are having to do when faced with domestic violence. And unbeknown to me, there was a long, she had been exposed to so much domestic violence in the years leading up to that night that I found out. So yeah, she did what was best at that time, and she did the best thing possible. And thank God I moved into that house 2 weeks prior. It was meant to be. It was, yeah.
I'm gonna say, Steph, intuition of your mum, I think, was something there that you were put there for a reason, and that reason, your mum was with you that night. I solely believe that. I reckon she was with you that night.
Me too. I always say that to anyone that I'm telling a story with, that I felt I felt a sense of protection. I don't know why, because I also forgot to mention that when I got the 3-year-old out, I was covered in petrol after putting the flames out on her, but I was only, it would have been a metre away from him. And although he had the red jerry can in one hand, he had a big butcher knife in the other hand, and I didn't know. So he could have lunged at me at any moment. And thank God he didn't. Because we all would have been done for. And yeah, the realization of that, it just weighs heavily.
Oh, absolutely. And because Steph, how old were you at that stage? And how you were only a few years into your policing career. Like, how old were you at that stage?
Oh, you're now asking me, damn. I was a first class Connie at that time, 2018. How old I've been? I'm 37 now. Don't make me do the maths, Adam.
All right. I won't be that cruel. I won't be that cruel to you. I won't be that cruel to you. But you were mid or early
Mid 20s, I think, yeah.
yeah, mid 20. Like, that's just, yeah, I take my hat off to you, and just, that's why when you said to me, oh, my story's, it's not that significant. I didn't do. Yes, you did. You saved life. You did what you signed up to do, protect and serve, and you did that night in 2015. And yeah, I just, as soon as I read that story and when you sent me that, my heart broke, because, as I said to you, I've got a niece who's, nearly 2, and I'd do anything to protect her, anything. And, she means the world to me. And that's what you're supposed to do as a parent. You're supposed to protect your children. That's what your job is. And yeah, it's just, thank
Hard to
God.
comprehend.
Yeah, thank God that piece of shit is rotting in jail, and that's all we'll say. He's rotting in jail, and people actually go and read. Steph and I will leave out what he said about why he did what he did that night. We'll leave that out. Go and read that for yourself, and it just goes to show you just how low this person is. And that's how I'll be sensitive on that matter, is go and look it up. Go and search Steph's name, and you will read it, and you will understand how amazing this woman is. She's just an absolute inspiration. So, Steph, on behalf of everyone, thank you for what you did that day. It's just the courage you showed to do what you did. Mate, I commend you, mate. You're an absolute inspiration, and I mean that wholeheartedly. And I think everyone and whoever listens to this podcast will be in agreement with what I've just stated. So, thank you. So, Steph, you mentioned that happens, and then after that incident, you mentioned that you got into the domestic violence squad, and but you went to do your detectives course. And can you give us a little bit of an insight into what made you want to go down this path of policing?
Yeah, so during that incident that we just spoke about, I was treated pretty poorly from my own at that scene. Um, Without warning or an indication, I was told that my house had now become a crime scene, which, theoretically that happens, but I was told that I couldn't go back into the house. So it would have been nice to have some sort of warning as I was standing out there in my PJs and it was freezing. But as mentioned before, a few coppers came over to talk to me to check on me. One of them who I used to work with at Ellenbrook and the other one who was the sergeant. And when he asked how I was, I remained hard on the surface and said that I was fine, but I don't think it really kicked in at that time, just what I had seen. And the sergeant said to me that I told him I'll provide a statement at some point, just not tonight. I'm just a bit, run down after that. And he said, yeah, mate, no problem. I fully understand that. Went over to speak to the detectives because they wouldn't even come over and speak to me for whatever reason. And funny enough, one of the detectives that showed up at the scene was actually the one that blasted me on the parade ground that we spoke about earlier. Yeah. So he attended, didn't approach me, didn't talk to me. And the sergeant came back and he goes, Steph, I'm sorry, but the detectives have pretty much demanded a statement from you now. And I was told that they need to treat me like any other witness. But if you're going to treat anyone like any other witness, you treat them with respect. You don't force people into statements. And that was very much the impression that I got at that time. And I would never force anyone, or whether it be a victim or a witness, into taking a statement. You either do or you don't. So I was forced to take a statement right then and there, as well as sitting in the back of the patrol car, writing out my own statement. So one wasn't even taken off me. No, that's just not what you do. And to say this is how you treat everyone else, I was thinking, I'm a cop. I don't treat people like that. And it was in that experience that I thought, with the complete disregard and arrogance and to dismiss me like that, considering, what I just went through, I wanted to be better than that. So not only that, but witnessing such a thing drove me into the field of something in relation to either child abuse squad or sex assault squad, and that's dealing with such vulnerable victims. And that's why I decided to go down the avenue of seeking out, detectives.
And how that process was, it was a vigorous one and it was hard. And again, you faced challenges again here and I'll let you tell the story, Steph. I'm not gonna, I'll let you share this one.
Yeah, so I got accepted into detective training, and it was a 6-week course from memory. And I'm a very much the type of person that shows up early. And unfortunately, on my first day, I showed up late. So I'm all for first impressions as well. First impressions last. And it's a known fact within the first 30 seconds of speaking to someone, you know if you're going to like that person or not. And I just thought to myself, great, I've just made such a bad impression already. And I'm late for my first day. So I felt like I already had a target on my back. It wasn't so much that anyone had said anything at that time. I could sense it in the room. I could read the room by the instructors, and that first morning, first induction, I'll never forget the officer in charge of detective training at that time, and his spiel was, in your exams, in your law exams, I expect each and every one of you to get a pass mark of above 90%, and if you don't, be expected to front my office to explain your reasoning why. And as I said at the start, like I've never been one for exams, and I get the understanding behind it. You have to show that you know what you're talking about and doing. But we all know that when we're out on the road, if we get stuck or need help, we know that we can call someone. We know that we can go to our notebook and find the legislation. So on my first exam, I ended up scoring 89%. Which in university is considered one of the highest grades that you can get, but apparently that wasn't good enough, so I had to front his office to explain my reasons why. And I just said to him, I can't remember exactly what I did say, to be honest, but it would have been along the lines of, as soon as I get home after leaving the police academy, which is 4 or 5 o'clock, I think it is, I drive home, which is an hour drive. I have something quickly to eat, and I'm studying until 10 p.m. every night. I told him that's what I do, and that's what I was doing. You can ask my husband that, because I was doing that. I wasn't taking advantage of nothing. I was really trying to put in as much effort to show them that I am fully committed to the career of detectives. Next exam, I ended up scoring 87%. Still not good enough. 81%. It was in the 80s. I remember that. And again, I was pulled into his office, having to have a stern talking to as to why I'm not getting the high marks, and I couldn't give him an answer. I just said, look, I'm doing the best that I can as far as grades go. And it wasn't until 3 days out from graduating, so I passed everything from what I was told. Well, I passed everything. There were no more exams or anything left, and we had a scenario, and we had to do a debriefing to superintendent, and my debriefing was currently lacking, and it was pretty poor from the feedback that I got. And it was at that point that they told me that I don't think you're up to probationary standard, and I think that I think you'll get more experience from being seconded to a detective office, and we'll make sure that happens, and then come back and redo it. I was gutted. I think right then and there in that moment when I left and I was on the phone to my husband, I said to him, my confidence is fucking shattered now. I thought that I was good at interviewing. They told me I'm not. I thought I was good at, building rapport. They showed me and demonstrated that I wasn't, because when you're doing your statements and they're doing your scenarios, you're doing it with actors. And another example was one of the actors that I did have, she was a perceived sex assault victim. So I thought, oh, great, this is like my area, because this is so many scenarios where I've, had praises and compliments directly to my supervisors and my bosses from previous spots, saying, thank you for having that officer take my statement, because I felt like I was heard. And when I felt like I was going to shine in this moment, but it was in front of an actor, they made it very hard on me. They took the role a little bit too seriously. I didn't think that at the time, and I didn't express that at the time. It wasn't until one of the trainers had said to me, yeah, that actor, we don't like getting them in because we've had complaints about them in the past. And I couldn't help but feel like I was being set up for failure at that point. But I passed it regardless. But yeah, going back to 3 days out and them saying that, we don't think you're up to probationary standard, and removed from the course, I didn't get what was promised to me, and that was a posting to a secondment to a station. I had to literally beg the OIC at my station at the time, who told me that there were no openings at that time. So I took it upon myself to meet the detective across the road. At that time it was Armidale Detective's Office, and I met with him to speak about what had happened, and obviously areas that I need to work on. And all I want is just that mentoring, and I'm willing to learn and I want to learn. I just need that exposure. And he was all on board about it too, from the genuine conversation that we had. And there was no trackment and there was no movement at that time, and I just felt that I wasn't being listened to. And because of how hard I took that, being removed from the detectives, I thought that I was fucking useless. I felt I'm not good at my job. I'm obviously not a good officer. If I can't get through training, I'm not good enough. And that's when the spiraling started. At that point of the self-doubt started to weigh heavily on me. And when I spoke out to the police, the detective training, that the fact that I'm not getting a placement, can you help with that? No one was helping me at that point. So I had to take it upon myself again to approach a female superintendent, who said, I think it would be in your best interest to go to another station. I knew I shouldn't have taken it, but I did. And when I did get there, I was involved in another incident where, I got involved in another incident, which is another story. And it wasn't until I drove back home that night after dealing with that, I was broken, and that's when the suicidal thoughts started to come in. And my partner said to me, you need to get help, because you've never gotten help since that off-duty incident. And thank God he did mention it, because it wasn't until I got the help that I was able to do the work that I needed around not only myself, but being a better police officer as well.
And I think it's a key point you touch on, Steph, that you've become an advocate in that space now for helping officers and first responders, and the transition, and being through your own overcoming your own adversity again, which, your story is just one of continual fighting for, the dream job that you wanted has cost you more in the long run than what you ever thought it would. But you have become such an advocate in that space for helping other police officers and also first responders transition. And because you felt abandoned. You had no support. There was, and when you were telling me about that 3 days out, that's going to break anyone. That's going to break anybody, no matter how resilient they are, Steph. That is going to break anybody. That's where you wanted to go. That's where you wanted to be. And I'm so glad your husband said to you, go and get the help you need, because it's not, as you know, and I know it firsthand too, of having those thoughts and having an attempted suicide. When I did, if I didn't speak up, I wouldn't be here today, same as you. Speaking up is the reason you are here today and why we're having this conversation. And it's not a sign of weakness to speak up. I always say that, Steph. It is a sign of strength. And my psychologist said it. I'm sure your psychologist, which you're actually going in to study that now as we will get down the track, that it's a sign of strength. And the more we lose too many people that think it's, pride gets in the way to, no, I'm weak, I can't do that. It's a weakness to speak, and it's not. And thank God I'm so glad as a mate I'm so glad you're here. And it's, you are now in that space, and we are both in that space trying to change that space and help so that we don't lose any more people that unnecessarily don't need to die. They really don't. So yeah, thank God. And so you ended up, as you said, you ended up in the domestic violence unit, and then we'll talk about that you found that you got there in the end to where you wanted to, but I want to touch on a couple of awards that you were awarded from that fateful night that in 2015. And then I want to talk about your transition and what you're doing now, and because it's an important and what you want to achieve into the future. So in 2018, you were awarded the inaugural, and I'm probably going to stuff this up, Steph, and we spoke about this earlier. Can you say what is it the National Australian Police Bravery Award? Is that it?
You're right. Yes. You'd
Yes.
see. Well.
No, there you go. So you're awarded this. So that was from the Commissioner's Award for Bravery, and then how did this come about? Was that put forward by your peers, or how did you get nominated for this award?
Yeah, so I never heard of the National Police Bravery Award, which was handed down by the Police Federation of Australia, and apparently it came about in 2018, so that's why I was the inaugural winner for that year. So as I said, I've never heard of it. I received a phone call one day, and they introduced themselves saying that from the Federation of Police, and that you're the winner of the National Police Bravery Award. And I was like, what? Is this a joke? And then it wasn't until this person, until he named my husband, and apparently there across Australia, there were, I think they got the numbers down to 79 applicants, and the panel had to establish who out of those 98, 97 applicants was the most deserving, and apparently I received it. And when I said who rang, who nominated me, and they said, well, it was only one person, it was your husband. So I just started crying profusely at that time, because because not only did that incident happen, and then being kicked out of the detective training and having to suppress everything again for the last 3 years, having to be seen at that time, it was really comforting to know that. So when they said that they were going to fly Scott and I, my husband Scott, over and I to Canberra, we're like, woohoo, yeah. So we got to go to Canberra, and I met personnel on the panel, including Alan Sparks, who I admire so much. He is a retired detective senior constable of the New South Wales Police. He's on the panel for that as well. And he's one of the 5 recipients that has been awarded the Cross of Valour. So it was an absolute privilege to have met him, and it is an absolute privilege to call him a friend, because he just, I'll always take away the conversations that we had, and his support, and why he felt like I was a deserving winner and stuff like that. I hold it so close to me. And when it was awarded by Peter Dutton as well, and I'm a big fan not fan, but I'm a big supporter of Peter Dutton. I think he's doing amazing things. So it was really good to be exposed to that, where there's been silence and not so much support from my own through those years. And to be acknowledged in Parliament by Prime Minister Scott Morrison and the opposition leader, Bill Shorten, the next day. Who can ever, how can you compare that to anything, really? It was, out of body experience.
And I want to touch on Scott, because Scott has been there. He's been your rock. He's been your support through some really dark times, and just a selfless act that he
Yeah.
just nominated you, and just I'm so glad that he did, because yeah, although Steph, we don't do it for recognition. We don't do it for praise. We don't do it for recognition. It's nice to be, it's nice to be recognized for what you did. And that day, you saved those little girls' lives. So it's so grateful that Scott did what he did for you. And then, so that was 2018, and then in 2019, you were nominated for the Star of Courage medal. And for people who aren't aware, I had to look this up, Steph. I didn't know what the Star of Courage medal was. Can you explain about the Star of Courage medal and how this came about and how you were nominated?
Yes, I didn't know about it either, to be honest. So from my understanding of what it is now, is awarded to Australians for acts of conspicuous courage in circumstances of great peril. And I think it was created in 1975, and the decoration recognises acts of bravery who selfishly put themselves in jeopardy to protect the lives of property and others. And so far, I think there is, since 1975, 182 people have been awarded with this award. And it was one of my friends in the job who awarded me, put my nomination forward. So again, didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. It was just out of the kindness of her heart that she put my name forward. And I just want to say, like you mentioned it, Adam, the fact that we don't do these things for recognition, and you're so right. And I just want to say the award itself was the award that all those kids got out safe, and that in itself was the highest gratitude, I think, in the way I see things.
And I can see. I see what you're saying there, Steph, and I totally agree. I think because that was, and I saw it when I did my like when you sent me your bio and I did some research into doing this episode with you. I'll tell you what, it's all poppy syndrome, isn't there? Like when you did your police media stuff, there was comments saying, "Oh, any person would have done that," and to just drag you down, and it was just. I felt like saying a comment going, "You've got no idea, like you don't know, and could you do it? No." So and it was just, as you know, tall poppy syndrome exists, and we just seem to want to, we can't just say well done for what you did. Like there's people out there that still want to drag you down, and as much, but you and I both know that there are people out there, but amongst your true friends, and what you should be absolutely proud of that. And as you say, those girls, that's there for those, they were saved that day. And it leads me into this, Steph. What's your hope for them for the future?
Especially a 3-year-old, like if she ever hears this one day, like I just want her to know, and to know that at her most extremely lowest point of her young, innocent life, she demonstrated to me just what bravery was. Being so scared, being so vulnerable, being so hurt, being so injured, feeling like the person that was meant to protect her the most let her down. She demonstrated such bravery, and I think I got it from her, to be honest. I want her to know that she is strong and that she is capable of fucking anything, and having to go through something so horrific at such an early age is just unimaginable and undescribable. And I hope that not just her, but her siblings, her daughter, her other sister and her brother, are there for one another to support each other, and that they live their lives to their fullest of their abilities, despite this, and to wear their scars with pride, as no child deserves to go through what they went through.
That's a pretty powerful statement, and I can see just taking nearly welling up again. You're doing a good job at making me well. Thanks, Steph. Like, yeah, it's a powerful message. That's a really and I think if there's anything that they can take away is, that they are true, the resilience that they've shown going forward. And I only hope for them, like you, and I'm sure anyone who listens to this, that they do live their life to their fullest, and that, they don't face tragedy. They will, but not in that severity again in their lifetime. And that's all we can hope, that they live a safe, and the rest of their childhood is safe and into their adult lives. That's all we can hope for, Steph. And you've done that, which you did that fateful night, and absolutely. So, Steph, we mentioned that transitioning out of the police force, it can be hard, and for you it's been tough and challenging. And for you transitioning out, do you feel that you've lost a sense of your purpose, or did you know that it was time to transition out?
100%. Even now, I am struggling immensely with identity at the moment, because I always thought that I would retire from policing. So this journey of hasn't been easy, because my psychiatrist has recommended, as well as my other treating team, has recommended me for medical retirement. So I'm currently going through the process of that right now. So then, to go through pinnacle points of my life, being having my first baby, and then having been drawn the cards of medical retirement, so to speak, to be thrown into the mix. I am at a bit of a loss with who I am and the direction of where I'm going. So yeah, it's definitely been very hard for me.
Well, Steph, you mentioned that you had your baby daughter in 2021, and you faced some really challenging times and some really dark days. And if it's all right for you to share, you got to your lowest point, and if you could share with us what stopped you and from taking your own life, that when you got to that dark place.
Yeah, so through my meetings and treatment with my clinical psychologist at the time, so Doug Brewer and my psychiatrist, Dr. Samuels, who are amazing in their field of trauma. I was seeing them right up until my pregnancy. I still do see Dr. Samuels, who's been my biggest supporter through everything. He's been, like I said, my biggest advocate, who's believed me, who's genuinely shown concerns and not treated like some people. Because this is why I'm so fascinated with this field and wanting to get into the field of understanding this a bit better. Because when someone comes to you and when they are at their lowest, saying, "I want to kill myself," or I need help, I'm not coping," listen to what they're saying, because you'll hear the desperation in their voice, and it's not a joke. And unfortunately, some people can be quite dismissive without meaning to, I guess, because there's still such a stigma associated with PDS. I say I now, PDSI, because I'm trying to change my language around that, with post-traumatic stress injury, not disorder. But I was advised by them during that pregnancy that I would be at risk of postnatal depression due to already being diagnosed with insomnia, major depression, and PDSI. It wasn't until her arrival, my daughter's arrival, just how challenging it was going to be, because she was born 3 weeks premature. She was born with jaundice. So when she wasn't sleeping, she was awake and screaming or most of the time. Like, I would say that she's crying, but she's not a crier, she's a screamer. She's always been a screamer. And, that's enough for anyone to bear, right? And I went through the challenges of trying to breastfeed her, but due to having a blocked tear duct in one of my breasts, she was favouring one breast over the other. So she started to get a head tilt. And I knew that something wasn't right, and I didn't think that she was getting enough milk during that time. And I remember one of the nurses coming into me at one point when I was, crying, because hormones are fucking great when you're pregnant too. You really do get an appreciation of what people are talking through until you actually experience it. God. And she said to me, what medication are you on? And I told her the medications that I was on since 2016. And she said, I think that you need to stop that. You need to stop that cold turkey. So I did, because I thought, well, she's a midwife, she's an expert. I need to listen to what she's saying, because these medications that I was on was preventing me from getting up early in the night to feed my daughter, and I was a zombie trying to attend to her, and I was fearful that I was going to drop her because of my medication. So it wasn't until I got off my medication that I had a relapse at home. And it wasn't until I had my relapse that I said to my husband that, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I think that you guys would be better without me. I was sharing these, thoughts with him, and I said, I need help. Like, we don't have family support. We got nothing. I mean, I really do know what I understand the meaning now when they say you need a village to raise a child, and we just didn't have that. And Scott again said, you need to reach back out to Dr. Doug Brewer and Dr. Samuels, because you're not coping and you're scaring me, pretty much. So then we all went in to have a meeting together, including my husband, and it was recommended that I go into the Bubs and Mums unit at one of the hospitals. But it wasn't until that I went in there that they treated you like you were a really high risk patient. I had no door on my bathroom. I wasn't allowed to take in my baby tin formula. I wasn't allowed my cord to charge my phone, because those were all at risk. Even though that I didn't attempt self-harm at that time, I was still treated as very much a high-risk patient. And I remember turning to Scott and saying, please don't leave me here with her. I need support, and this isn't support that I'm seeking and that I'm needing. I need support to know how to cope with my mental health, who can understand my mental health, to know how I can be not only a better mother, better person, but to be able to look after her in the best way possible that she is deserving of, as well as my husband deserving, me to be able to be functional when he's back working again. I don't want him having to feel bad or feel guilty for going back to work because he doesn't think I'm going to be able to cope on my own. So I think that feeling that I was failing my daughter by my inability to breastfeed her and the ability to not have control over my mental health at that time, and the fact that I put so much pressure on myself that I wasn't fulfilling the role as being able to be a natural mum, like take on this role as a mum so naturally, as I thought that I would. I felt that I was failing my husband as well, because not only were we dealing with a new baby, and having to be a rock through the process when my self-esteem was continually going down, feeling that I wasn't good enough. And that's when I began to have the thoughts of what to include. And I was sitting there at night during the day thinking, what can I put in my suicide note to my daughter and my husband when I eventually was to go through that, if I ever was to. Thankfully didn't.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you didn't, and because you know yourself, and we'll touch on in a minute what you're doing now and the amazing what you're studying, and we research shows, Steph, that most people who attempt suicide, they don't want to die. It's they just want help, and it's the last resort. It's the I'm doing this to, I'm doing this because and I know it myself. I've been there. I've done it. I've attempted it. I know what it's like. Looking back, and I'll say this, Steph, and I said it in the book. Would I have jumped the day that if I hadn't have had my epiphany to stop? I don't know. But I know that speaking up is the greatest thing that I've ever done, and you did as well. You reached back out for that help, and you and I have spoken about this in depth, and we won't talk about it. You and I have spoken about this a lot off air, but the message is that you're saying and I'm saying, Steph, is it is not weak to speak. Speak up. Ask for that help. It is there, and speaking about it is a sign of strength. And it's been so cathartic to speak up and get it off your chest, and I know it has for you too. And that's the message that's why I do the podcast, and that's why I think it's so important. And I think you agree that we're stronger together. We're stronger together, and speaking and tackling these problems. And I think, yeah, thank God you didn't do what you did, and thank God you do what you do now, and your advocacy for veterans and first responders is so. Yeah, I commend you for what you do, and it now leads into the work that you do. That you're actually studying. So you're actually studying criminal psychology. And you want to give back, you want to help people with this transition. And what have you found most rewarding about this? Is it are you starting to find your purpose again? Is this the purpose that you know this is the right field for you?
Yeah, so when I through my policing career, especially when I first came to terms and admitted that I was struggling with my mental health, I hadn't received the best advice, treatment, or support from the WA Police when I came out about it, because there was still very much a stigma attached to it. I was isolated, treated differently. I was told that I wouldn't be able to perform compared to my peers who hadn't been diagnosed with, which is absolute bullshit, as you know, Adam, because I've gone through the treatment. I've gone through not just the treatment, but the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the
process, like the process of it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've done the work and exercises and things that you need to do in order to take accountability for when you know that the triggers are coming on.
Yep.
So you know yourself that when you're feeling triggered and you have those tools, that's the word I'm looking for, tools.
Yep.
You know what tools to pull out of your toolkit, because it's taught to you through your healing journey and your coping journey through speaking and speaking to specialists, of what tools that you need to pull out of your bag in order to know how do I need to cope with this situation right now.
Yep.
With work and with exercise, and if it was to flare up, or if a situation or a stressful situation was to flare up, I know how to manage that. And because I know how to manage that, and because I'm so self-aware of that, I'm actually a lot better in those situations now than what I was before. Yes, I was suppressing before, but it brought me to the point where I had to have a complete, utter breakdown. And now going through medical retirement, Whereas if I had if I had understood this at the time, I don't think I'd be going through medical retirement. If I had early intervention and sought treatment earlier, I would probably still be in the police force. So I would much rather someone in my corner that has managed their stressful situations and who is self-aware of those things than someone who is in complete denial and suppresses them, and it come out in a situation further down the line which they didn't expect it to. So when they, as the saying goes, where they just rupture, they're a ticking time bomb type thing. There are people out there like that, and especially within the services that don't like to bring it up because of the stigma that's associated with it, as we've discussed, that it being you're weak if you speak up about it, which is now I've learnt to be so completely wrong. Because when you express your emotions and you put on that fake mask in order to appease others, you're causing damage to not only yourself, but putting out that false identity that this is who I am when it's not, and it becomes difficult further down the line. And it wasn't until my difficult experiences in the policing, being subjected to the sexual harassment, bullying, unfair treatment, where I found the courage to speak up to the injustice more. And if that meant losing friends or losing favoritism in the process of that, I just thought, you know what, so be it. I have always been fascinated with human behaviour, and my current psychologist encouraged me, whilst I was awaiting the process of medical treatment, to go do something for myself, to take time out for myself instead of just being a mum, because that's what I was doing, and I was itching at home because I hate not working as well. I began I took away from my psychologist. I thought, well, what is it that I can do in my time now that I'm waiting this process? I thought, well, what's my next career move? And it felt like a no-brainer to me about the psychology path, because I've always been fascinated with the human behaviour. And having completed my first semester with a sick baby, as well as, I do have significant, terrible memory. It gets me frustrated at times still, but I feel as though I'm not done with the criminal aspects of things. So if I don't receive the grades that I want in order to pursue clinical psychology, I will be pursuing an avenue somewhere along the lines of either working with children who have been exposed to severe trauma, because I just feel like that's my connection, and I can do deep and meaningful work there. Not only this, but I want to be able to help first responders, as I don't want them to experience what I've experienced with the isolation and the struggles of speaking out to fear. Because when I did, I was really scared it was going to cost me my career. And I've since learned, and through talking through other veterans and other police officers as well, that lots of people feel this way too, that they're scared of speaking out, as they think that they're going to be seen as them not being able to perform to the fullest of their capabilities, and that they're weak, and everything that we've said. And I want to be able to come from a place of I've been there, I've experienced it myself. Let me help you struggle with your mental health struggles as well, because it's so important. We all need to be in it together. And as you said before, Adam, with the suicidal thoughts and attempts, it's not that you want to do it as much. It's that you just want the pain to stop.
Yep.
And that's all people want. We all just want someone, not only for support, but to be understood and to be heard. And I didn't get that. So, and there's so many people out there that don't either. And I want to be able to be in the space where I can provide that to others, because no one deserves to go through that. Especially when you've sworn an oath to serve and protect the community, you expect to be taken care of. And when you don't, it's a complete letdown.
Oh, 100. And what you said, Steph, that it's a key point you touch on, that the tools in the toolkit, and you know, when you're starting to slide. I do now. I know when I'm starting, and I can catch it, and I can catch it before it gets too far beyond me now. And there's still days, and I use the term life's like and like emotionally, there's great days. It's like a heart rhythm beat. Like there's great times, then there's lulls, then there's great times, then it's just, that's the part. There's great times, but then there's hard times coming as well. And that's how I've dealt with it. And I think you're another example of, you know the triggers, you know the signs, but you're also, I know with you and I know with me, I'm pretty comfortable to sit in the shit too. Like I can sit in it and get back out again. Like it's taken a long time to get to that process of getting, like, sitting in that shit, and it's uncomfortable and it's not nice, but you can do it. And then you work out, all right, the only way is up. That's the only way is up. Once you've hit rock bottom, the only way is up. You can't keep going further down. You then start the inner fight, and the inner fight to want to be here. And that's, you know it as well as I do, that the inner fight, you've got to want to fight to be here. And that's, and look, some people just, they just, as you said, the pain, just want the pain to stop. And that's, that's their last resort. They've got nothing else to turn to. And I know it firsthand. I was there. And then, but the fight to live. And if, yeah, we all can take that away, that's right. And I think what you're going to add, Steph, in once you do become qualified, you're going to add such a unique perspective to veterans and first responders because of your lived experience. You've been there, you've done it. Because most, and I'll say it, most of us, Steph, don't really want to talk to psychologists because they don't get it. They don't understand. Like especially PTSI, which I'm going to start using that term because I like that. I really like that. I like that as they haven't been through the trauma that you've been through. They haven't been through the trauma that I've been through. So they yes, they can talk clinically about it, but lived experience, you've, like, that is just so amazing. And I've another friend of mine who I've told you about, is she's a firefighter and she's now studying psychology full time as well. She's going to have such an impact in that space because she's got the lived experience and she's been on the front line. She's dealt with trauma. She's seen it. Then she can implement the clinical side of it, which is going to be amazing. It's absolutely, and I can't wait for you to. I can't wait for you to be qualified. I can't wait for that phone call to say, "Hey, Adam, guess what? I've done it. I've done it." And I won't be like your dad and go, "Oh, but Steph, the next part, I will be there to say, well done, mate," because it is going to be amazing. And what your vision is to help first responders transition and veterans, it's just amazing. And I take my hat off to you because, as you say, there's got to be that support there for first responders. And there's so much more work to be done in that field. And it firsthand, I know it. And that's why we advocate, and that's why we do these podcasts, so that people out there who are struggling can see that you can get through your struggles. You can do it, and you're living proof of that. So, well done on that. And so, knowing what you know now, Steph, and everything you've been through, was joining the police still the best decision you've made?
I'm trying to look up the question that one was so I can follow my notes. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, at the time, yes. It is, because it's definitely because these experiences you don't learn in any other career. And because every day is you don't know what way it's going to go. And that was my fascination with it to begin with, is you don't treat every day as the same. And that's what I liked about it, enjoying the police force. So I'm glad that I did get knocked back those 3 times before I eventually got accepted, and after losing my mum, because it prepared me a lot for a lot of hostile situations that I was faced with in my career. But at the same time, although it was the best decision to make, right now, I can't help but feel like a failure though, because I never got to accomplish my career objectives, which was either joining the K9 unit or getting through the detective training, because it wasn't until I received my award in Canberra that I got a phone call from another who took over the detective training at the Joondalup Academy, who rang me saying, "Steph, I don't know why you removed from the course. Can you come back?" So that really annoyed me, and it's still something that I need to work on with my bitterness, because all of that has weighed heavily on my self-doubt and my self-confidence, and that I feel as though that I've failed this career that I never got to accomplish, due to the constant walls that kept on coming up and obstacles that kept on being put in my path in front of me. And there was only just so much that I could take and stand my ground and stand up to the bullies and stand up to the injustice. And I was reaching a point where I'm fighting myself. I'm fighting my worth too much. I'm getting too burnt out, and it's costing me too much. My mental health, my physical appearance, because I end up losing just so much weight as well through stress. I was getting a little tired of having to defend myself constantly. So, yeah, I'll never regret it. It's something I always wanted to do. It's just a shame it's not going out in the way that I wanted, because, as I said, I always thought that I'd retire from it.
It's on your terms and the way I get it. I totally, and it's very similar to veterans who are medically discharged as well. Same thing. They thought they would be lifers, and it's just cut short. But Steph, I think, and you may, I don't see it as that, and you might tell me, you might say, "Oh, Adam, it's different," but I don't see it as a failure. I see it as you achieved so much in such a short time, and the challenges that you faced along the way, you overcame them with apps like tenacity, and you did, with all the challenges, with all the walls, you still served your state of Western Australia, and you save those. That I go back to, there's always the flip side, Steph. You saved those girls that day, and that is something that is, not a failure at all. You're not a failure, and do not ever think that. And I don't think anyone who listens to this podcast will think that you're a failure. So you're not. So yeah, you're not, Steph. You're an absolute inspiration, and that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because you are, and your story is just one of true grit, determination, never giving up, and that's what I love, and people can learn so much from your story. So yeah, no, I don't see it as that, and you might see it different, Steph, but I don't. So that's my little thing to you. And so, knowing what you know now, Steph, and everything that has happened, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would she listen?
I'm so stubborn. She probably wouldn't listen if I was to give her advice. So I would say to her, throughout your life, there are going to be authority figures and others who are going to perceive you as weak by showing sensitivity and compassion to others. But don't do that. It is actually a superpower, not a weakness, because people want connections, and not to connect with robots. And I think this is one of the challenges that I had in the policing, was because I got pulled up a lot of the times for showing compassion in lots of scenarios. But that's what makes us human. And I always thought that I'm going to, the uniform I put on, that this is a uniform, this is a job, right? But I'm never going to be disconnected from being a human. And that's one thing I would definitely take away from that. And don't let anyone ever tell you being too sensitive is weakness. To feel intense is not a symptom of weakness. It is a trademark of a truly alive and compassionate person. It is not the empath who is broken in society, who has become dysfunctional and emotional disabled to that idea. And there is no shame in expressing your authentic feelings. And I want everyone to know that there is no shame in that, because it's from your own personal perspective. And those who are at times described as being crazy or having too many issues are the very fabric of what keeps this dream alive for a more caring and humane world. Never be ashamed to let your tears shine a light in the world, because without darkness, there are no stars, which is my favourite quote. And
I love that.
yeah, I love it too. And lastly, I would say to her to be I would say to her, a satisfied life is better than a successful life, because our success is measured by others, but our satisfaction is measured by our own soul, mind, and heart.
Oh, that's powerful, Steph. That is very, very powerful. And sometimes I think a forgotten thing that we seem to look at success other than satisfaction and the materialistic things of what we've got in life as success compared to the satisfaction. And I think that is powerful. That is so, so powerful. And oh, wow, that's huge. Yeah, amazing. That's well, I've got a couple more questions to ask you, and then I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but I know you got a busy day ahead of you. And what what advice would you give anyone who is thinking about joining the police, Steph, knowing that what you've gone through, what they're going to experience? What advice would you give to them as a police veteran?
So I went through. So it's very much micromanagement. So if you're not familiar with that and you come out, say, fresh from high school, fresh from university, police want life experience. And that's why I'm so glad I had the life experience, because I was able to deal with stressful, vulnerable situations better because of that current exposure, because you get a bit of an understanding of what other people are going through if you yourself have gone through something similar. So I would encourage anyone to ever think about it to please have the appropriate support around you, and that no one prepares you for the controlling situations that you have, and that what you'll be involved in. It's all easy and it's all good and easy to say that, well, in this scenario, I'll act this way. But until you're faced with it, you don't know how you're going to react in those certain situations. Because I have seen firsthand of capable officers who have frozen up in scenarios, and one I know of who locked himself in a car and left his partner out to fend for themselves. So making sure that you have that awareness that you're going to be confronted with really bad situations that the social media or the news don't even present to us. A lot of stuff isn't put out there in social media or on the news because it's too much for the general public to deal with. So support is the biggest thing I could say, is making sure that you're surrounded by that. And be human, be kind, be understanding. Put your biases aside with any scenario that you go into, because all people want who you're going to see are at the lowest point, because let's face it, police deal with people who are at the lowest points in their life. They just want to be heard and listened to. And this includes, those who have done the most heinous of crimes as well. They just want to be heard. So people can only take so much until they're pushed to their absolute limits to show compassion. You don't have to be a robot in order to be an effective and successful police officer. And that's something I learned later in my career, which I wish I learned at the start of my career.
It's great advice, and I think too is don't lose that human factor, and don't become arrogant, don't become, look down on society, like, as I have had certain police officers do that have looked down. And I think it's a really good message. Just try and be as human as you can, show compassion, be kind, and as well as you can. I mean, you're dealing with the lowest of the low, which that's policing. It's a hard job and a tough job, but yeah, just stay human. And I think that's great advice. And I think any young person who listens to this going in, maybe get that little bit of lived experience is what Steph's saying, and then look at going down. I think if you're going to join early, like if you're 19 or 20, I think you need to go away and have a little bit more of life experience, and don't get it on the job. Go and get that, and then maybe come back at 24, 25, and then go in and have a career and see where policing goes. I think that's great advice, Steph. So, Steph, just lastly, what are your plans going forward with Scott and your beautiful your beautiful daughter?
Hopefully I haven't traumatized my husband too much. He still wants to be married to me. So that's the ultimate that's the ultimate goal moving forward. But at the moment, I think our daughter, she's nearly 2 now. So we're happy in our little nook at the moment with just us 3. Maybe further in as the years go on, if I don't get too old, because I am getting on, to have more children. But I'm really wanting to focus my attention, and Scott is 120,000% behind me about getting my qualification in psychology. So that's the ultimate goal moving forward, and hopefully, being more at peace in life, and being able to overcome anything that gets put in our ways as far as stressful scenarios come. But I also just want to open up by doing this podcast as well. Like, I just hope that it does resonate with other people, that you can rise above it, that I was a stubborn Ukrainian who felt that going through the police academy, I had to be such a strong person that never showed emotions. And it hasn't been since my healing journey that I have discovered who I actually am. And that's why I'm big on never let anyone dim your shine, and that sensitivity is actually, and showing compassion and empathy is actually a trademark and not a weakness. And
I think that it's a great message to just, you're at peace now. You're finding your peace, and it's great that you can find it, Steph. And I'm so grateful that you, as I say, and I'm 100% behind you as well, mate. You've got this, and as I say, I wanted to get you on because your story, it's truly inspirational. And there's a quote, Steph, that I want to finish with that I really believe sums you up. And if I may, I'll finish on this quote. Steph, your story is one of true grit, determination, and never giving in. I want to thank you for your service to WA and also your country. You are an inspiration to us all. Thank you for all you do for first responders and veterans and people who are suffering from mental health, and with your advocacy in the space for change. Steph, the quote is, "Where there is no struggle, there is no strength. I believe the only courage anybody needs is the courage to follow your own dreams." That's from Oprah Winfrey. Steph, you've followed your dreams to become a police officer. It is an honour to call you a friend and a fellow sister first responder. It has been an honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue Conversations. I want to thank you once again for your service and sharing your inspirational story. Thank you, Steph.
That's really, really nice words.
No,
thank you so much. Honestly,
thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out to listen. To give me the opportunity to speak, and I really am genuinely grateful for that. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. It's been my privilege. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam.
Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.